Today's guest is Robbie Hardy. Now, she describes herself as an entrepreneurologist. I'm not going to be able to spell that. I'm just going to say that. I can't say it either. She's also the author of 2 business related books, an experienced investor, someone who's developed corporate strategies for Fortune 500 companies. She's the founder of XL Ventures, an angel fund for women investors investing in female founders. And I love this line from your bio. Quote, your passion and mission are to help women find their own special flavor of confidence and courage to be brave and bold. So that kind of says it all. Robbie, welcome to the program. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm a little intimidated by your background. So, treat me like a kindergartner. But I'm really excited to interview you because you have so many things in your wheelhouse. And I think you bring so much to the table in terms of helping women who are, entrepreneurs and trying to figure out their next chapters. So let's kind of go back to your origin story. I read that you've done a ton of things. I mean, you were a teacher, you were a bus driver, you were a researcher. So talk about, your education and how you eventually got into the tech sector initially, correct?
Initially, yes. I mean, it was really about saying yes to opportunities that I really didn't have any experience for. So the way I got into the tech sector, my ex-husband was in graduate school and I was working, 5 jobs to put him through school. And that was part of when I was doing preschool teaching and driving the school bus. Then I had another job, and this is all in Chapel Hill. And there was a research assistant job opening because I didn't think I was really going to work in daycare or kindergarten my whole life. And so I took the job, knew nothing about it, to do statistical analysis for a survey of North Carolina. And that's how I got into technology. I had no idea what I was doing, but it happened that way. And so, I realized that I asked for help for people that were sort of in this Institute for Research that I was hanging out in, and they helped me. And so that's how it all started. And, I'm not technical. I learned a little bit of technical and realized it wasn't for me, but I know enough to be dangerous. So
right. I hear you. And you knew enough, obviously, to be able to build, a career, to have some fundamentals.
It was just opportunities. And,
right.
I kept saying yes when it seemed like it was the next step.
Absolutely. I also read that you've had a lot of side hustles along the way. And I think that's not uncommon for women because I think, a lot of times, you don't just get into a job and it's not a linear thing where you do a job for your whole life and then you retire. You dabbled in antiques, jewelry, pottery, right? All of these things.
Antique pottery, Roseville pottery.
Okay. And then you said, you know what, I'm going to do something on my own. How did that epiphany come about? And were you nervous? I mean, it's scary to strike out on your own, right?
So I had been in the corporate world, for 20 plus years and was successful by that measure, by the LinkedIn outside view measure. And, but I always felt something was missing. I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. And I got to the point where I thought, I think I need to go do something else. Maybe I don't need to learn any more technology. Maybe I've had enough. It's enough is enough. So I'll leave and figure out what's next. And then when I told them that I was leaving, because this was 1995 and I was a woman, and so that was, nobody wanted a woman to leave in that situation. So they offered me a paid leave, sort of patted me on the head. And so instead of, being insulted and saying, I took the offer. And so I went to Colorado and I hiked in the mountains and among the aspens in October of that year, and just sort of started thinking about, what did I really want to do? What was I missing? I was in my corporate world. We were always building, new things for clients. And there were plenty of elements that were the same in software. And I kept saying to, the management team, why aren't we making products so that we can leverage these more? But they really cared about the billable hour. I hated worrying about, beating people to death to bill so that we could make it. And so it was all those things combined, and I just did it. And I certainly, after I did it, I had many sleepless nights, but they ended up being my client because I bootstrapped the first company. And so we worked we did the consulting work by day and built the product on nights and weekends. So it actually ended up being very serendipitous, how it all came together.
So, what was it, do you think, about that experience being outside? Because I'm a huge hiker. In fact, I just got back from Acadia in Maine with my
Nice.
daughter. And there is something really that gives you space, right? To
Yeah,
think.
because it's about breathing. Women are really particularly bad at holding our breath. And you don't realize how much you hold your breath until somebody, points it out. And I learned about that skiing. I had a ski instructor years ago who when I would go down, a steep slope, my toes would be all clenched and everything. And she said, okay, let's sing. And so we started singing, and you can't hold your breath and sing at the same time. So it is, when you're outside, I don't think, unless you're skiing, you don't think about holding your breath, but it is very freeing, and it's, the wind in your face and all those things and the peacefulness of it.
Absolutely. And just again, that like ability to have that time, right, for
Yeah. Yeah.
creativity and space. We can't think clearly and logically if we don't give ourselves some space to do that.
Right. I
Um,
mean, I'm a big walker. If I don't walk, if I miss more than a day of walking, it's my mental health is not in a good place.
I hear you. Yeah, I'm a yoga and a runner. So, same way. I got to do one or both every single day. So, now I know you founded or co founded a dozen companies, and yet you're still also a big part of what you do is help female entrepreneurs. So, how would you explain what you do today, where you are, what space
So
you're in?
I've been working, the way I got into mentoring women is my first secretary was a young German woman. Her name was Ruby. And she was really smart. It was my first time that I had an office and a conference room and, all that stuff and a secretary. And she was amazing, but she didn't know she was amazing. And so I started helping her or pushing her. No, but, I kept telling her I won't let her fail. And she just soared and I was hooked. And so that's a long, long time ago. So I always have 3 or 4 young women that I am, mentoring, coaching on the side, sort of informally. And then I do, mentoring and coaching for startups. So the passion, I realized that, I was always the only woman in the room. I'm a lot older. So I'm sort of the matriarch of, being the only one. And so, learning to find your voice and to find your place at the table and to know you belong at the table. And so all those things, I just always wanted to share what I had learned as I came up in my career. And so it's a lot about that. And it's
What,
hard to see women who, don't feel like they're enough. And so
right.
they want to help them.
And don't see their own potential.
No.
What do you think? What are the specific obstacles maybe that women face even in 2024 that, in the business world, in the workplace, and still having to overcome those obstacles?
Well, I think, women are still raised to be polite and pleasant and, not disruptive, where, boys will be boys, the rowdier they are, everybody thinks that's really cute. So that politeness and that not understanding that you have to stand up for yourself. I mean, women generally don't interrupt. If you're in a meeting and you're in a big meeting and there's a lot of people and everybody's talking, and the woman, particularly the new one, is waiting for somebody to ask her or waiting for a quiet time. And it's hard for a lot of women to get to the point where they're just their voice is as good as everyone else's, and interrupting is a complex thing, and it's okay. We don't have, your mother or your grandmother's not there to say, don't interrupt me. So there's a lot of that is embedded in us as young women. And we need to see people who look like us. And so that we can, some modeling is always helpful. And looking in the mirror and talking to yourself and saying, I can do this. I look just like her. I've got the same background. I can do this. Or I have the same background that he has. I can do this. So it's a lot of inner strength that it takes to get out there and not be arrogant or bossy or pushy or bitchy, even though you're accused of being bitchy if you speak up. But, that's just the nature of the
That's
beast.
complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things, we talk about this a lot on my podcast, is ageism. And,
Hmm.
you mentioned being the only woman in the room and being the matriarch. I still think we have a really big problem in the workplace, especially in corporate America, with ageism, especially as it relates to women, because we are such a youth-centered culture. And women apparently, it seems like, are aging out of jobs much faster than men are, and it's a real problem. I mean, I feel
Yes.
like
Yeah.
it's a real cultural issue.
Yeah, and it's another case. Of course, when I was the only woman in the room, I was young, and so now I'm way beyond that. But I was at an event the other day at a venture capital firm that had just celebrated their 30th anniversary, and there were some women, we hadn't seen each other in a long time, and we were all over 50 at least, and so we started talking, and so we were looking at ourselves and talking about various things, and looking at the men in the room who we know they look distinguished. That's how they're seen. They are our age or older. And talking about, I keep talking about, I don't care about that. You are who you are, and you can't wait for someone else to do it for you. But we had some good back and forth about how to support each other, and how women, I think you would probably agree with this too. Women are not as supportive of each other as they should be, because there's this theory in their head that there's only one seat at the table. So rather than help build a bigger table or put more seats at it, and let more women in, and so that's a problem, because there's a lot of data on having one woman on the board is great, but having two or three makes a big difference for them as well as everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to, I had a friend of mine, Yvonne Simons, who's a news director, which is still not a job that is held by a lot of women in this country. And she talked about, we have to talk to each other and share the knowledge, because if we don't uplift one another, we're not going to be helping other women rise. And that's really important.
Right.
I notice I'm looking at your books behind you. So you keep, talking
so,
about the table.
Latest book you can't see. The latest book is here. Sorry.
Okay.
Out
So
of-
tell me about your books and how how you believe they're informing people and giving them some good advice about, how to operate a new business or start a business.
Well, the first book, it's a trilogy.
Okay.
The first book is Upsetting the Table behind me, and it's about a young woman climbing the corporate ladder. And, it's told as a story. So there's characters. So it helps people remember, when there's, as advice is being given, or this young woman, Jessica, is learning how to do these various things, people remember that. People will say to me, well, how's Jessica doing? And of course, that book I put out in 2016, I'm thinking, Jessica. Anyway,
and it's fiction, right? I mean,
yes,
you're telling a story.
It's fiction.
Okay.
It's based on, a lot
Real
of
life events.
but it's fiction. So, it's sort of a business fable, but people do remember that. So that is, I feel like, so that's, that has touched lots of women. Obviously not enough. I wanted to touch, many, many more. The next book just came out last June, and it's called Fed Up to Startup. And it's when I left the corporate world, and it's another story about Rebecca. So now people ask me about Rebecca, and did Rebecca and Jessica know each other? So it's, it's really interesting when people,
They're almost like real people, right? The characters.
Well, but the good news about that is then they remember it. It's not like they're remembering some table or some this or whatever. It's something that they can relate to, and it's more digestible.
Not a self-help book, obviously.
No. Well, I mean, it's self-help in disguise.
I gotcha. Well, that's a great way to write something like that.
Yeah. So, yes, they've both done well. I'm happy with
what we talk about, this podcast is about transformation for women over 50. And I specifically chose that age because I feel like that's the age in the workplace where a lot of women start to feel not as relevant, not as seen, trying to figure out next chapters, being told maybe they're too expensive or their job is being downsized or changed. So what advice would you give to women who are kind of in that space going, I don't even know if I have another chapter. What is my next chapter? Because it can be really daunting after working for many, many years doing the same thing or working for the same company or in the same industry.
Right. And there's there's a time and a place, when it's time that to go look at something else. And so, figuring out what's the worst thing that can happen. If I decide to leave wherever I am, what's the worst thing that can happen? And sort through all those issues, put them out in front of you, even though you don't want to, face them. And that's a lot of it versus hiding it because it somehow feels like failure, when in fact it's a new chapter. And, many people have new chapters, in their lives. People working for the same company for 30 or 40 years is, a thing of the past.
Right.
So it's having that, and finding their place. And it's like, when you leave to do a startup, it's like, don't quit your day job till so that you can pay that you have, you've got enough, or you're sure enough that you've got something or someone to lean on if it doesn't work out. But it's hard to stay. I mean, it's changing a culture unless you're in the senior management position is just not possible. And the culture is probably what's keeping some of these people down. And because it's not rewarding women, or it doesn't understand women, or thinks women, if you have gray hair, then, and that's how I got gray hair, is I'd stopped coloring my hair. I was researching, how does the world treat women with gray hair? So I was picking up all this data. I was living in Napa at the time. So I told my hairdresser, and so I said, you have to help me. This is going to be so painful. I've been, coloring my hair for 36 years, please. So it was such an interesting process, just as a digression. So we used to sit at the bar in restaurants in Napa, and, people would say, oh, what do you do? And so you'd meet people from all over the world. And once my hair was gray, or pretty much gray, no one asked me again. It started as the gray became more prevalent. People stopped asking me. And it was all within a year. So come on, I can't have aged that much other than my hair. And so they'd still ask my husband, but they would not ask me. And so that's just, there's a whole bunch more data than that. But yeah.
Yeah.
You sort of become invisible or irrelevant, and you feel that way. I felt more empowered because, just because of who I am. And I would say, so they'd ask, my husband, and they'd talk, and I'd say, do you want to know what I do? And of course, just to make them a little uncomfortable. And so we thought you were retired or whatever. So
that's really interesting, because I think you're absolutely right. I think gray hair.
And we were talking about hair color at this event. People are saying, I'm not sure, these women, and we were thinking men would never have these conversations.
No,
but it is part of what it takes to be successful here.
Yeah, and especially in this age of social media, how we look plays a huge part in success, right? Which is unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate.
Be a thing.
So you regret going gray, because then the thought of going back is,
it's really, it's a lot of maintenance.
It is, and then and it's a lot to get. It's a process that.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. We do a lot. Women have to do a lot to make ourselves look good. Well, you have done so much. Is there anything out there that you're still like, gosh, I really want to tackle this? There's something I haven't done that I want to try.
Well, so my passion and mission is to get more women to be angel investors, to invest in women. I have been an angel investor since 1995. I was paying it forward from my first company. And I was always the only woman, amongst men. And we only invested in men. And that took me a while to figure out. It's like, why are there no women that founders? And there weren't a lot of women founders. But when I sold my first company, I was a woman CEO in a software company. I mean, it was like, having 5 legs. People would say to me, how does it feel to be a woman and be successful? It was like, how does it feel to be an idiot? Sorry,
Yeah, no, you can say that. It's a podcast.
Right. So so anyway, I have had a lot of passion. In 2000, I tried to raise a fund of only women investors, but it was too early. I either did it wrong, which is partly always the case, and I only had 6 women, after quite a long time. I opened it up and I had 75 men, and we were done. So in 2018, I had moved back here from Napa, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to do this. So I started talking to various people, and I'd learned a lot about, the whole, I worked with people around the country in angel investing and always trying to promote, women founders. So I asked 25 women not from all walks of life, not just, successful entrepreneurs, but, lawyers, doctors, accountants, all that kind of thing. And so asked them if they were interested and wanted to do it. And most of them didn't know anything about it. And 15 said yes. And so we worked together for about 9 months, and we started Excel Ventures, which is all women investors investing in women founders. And the other piece we did is what I learned from all my talks with people and speaking, et cetera, is that women like to know, not that I didn't know this, but women like to know what they're doing. They're not so much, their FOMO is not, I don't have to, I might want your shoes, but I don't have to invest in the same company you did.
Right.
It's just a different kind of thing. And so Excel is debt. So everybody understands a loan. So obviously it's a little bit different when you do it with a company and you're the one lending it, but that helped. And we reduced the amount that you had to for the initial investment so that people could put their toe in the water. Now we're getting ready to raise the second fund. I'm stepped back. I'm still chair emeritus, but this is not the Robbie Hardy Fund. This is Excel Ventures. And so there's a great group of people carrying it forward. And so it's fun for me to see how these women have gone from not understanding anything to being able to screen companies and do due diligence and all those things and share it with their friends, et cetera. So, it's working. And I've spoken all over the country about all this and, helped other angel funds get started. But that is my passion, to really move the needle on women investors, because if we don't do it, no one's going to. We can be unhappy with the men in the world, but that isn't the answer.
Yeah, that's a great project. One of my guests is an actress, Sharon Lawrence, and she talked about, supporting women directors, women producers, women all through her creative process. And, I think whatever industry you're in, obviously you're in the business space, but you can help other women launch.
Well, and the word angel actually came from Broadway. It was when people invested in producers or directors, whatever, and that was the angel on your shoulder. That's the history of it. So,
I didn't know that. Oh, yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
It's interesting. So my third book is about angel investing, and it's targeted toward helping women understand that a lot of it is just jargon, and and gives them opportunities to how to learn how to do that.
That's fantastic.
Without it being hard.
I gotcha. So what, if people want to follow you, see what you're doing, I will put all your links in the show notes, but okay. Where are you? Are you on social media, obviously?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. And that's probably I'm on Facebook, but not anything,
Okay.
It's just that's sort of a carryover. Right now I'm a mentor. I'm also a mentor in residence at Duke. So great. I'm there a few days. But yeah, I have a website, robbiehardy.com, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to meet anybody and talk and see if I can help them.
Great. Thank you so much, Robbie. I really appreciate your time today and sharing your expertise with my listeners. I hope my questions weren't too simplified, but
no, not at all. No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again. Have a great day.